We went to the wrap party, that this was it for the Andy Griffith Show.
Ron Howard may be remembered as the sweet, red-haired little boy from the Andy Griffith Show. But what many people don't know is that life behind the camera wasn't as perfect as it seemed. While millions of viewers loved the peaceful town of Mayberry and its warm-hearted characters, things behind the scenes were far more complicated. Ron was only 6 years old when he joined the cast as Opie Taylor, the son of Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith himself. The show looked like a dream, full of laughter, gentle lessons, and tight family bonds. But not every bond on set was strong, and not everyone treated Ron with the warmth he showed on screen. In fact, there was one cast member. He had a very difficult time with someone he didn't get along with at all, and that person left a lasting mark on his memories of the show. That person was Frances Bavier. The actress who played Aunt Bee, she appeared to be a kind, motherly figure on the show, always cooking, cleaning, and offering advice. But off camera, things were very different. Frances was known to be very serious, distant, and even cold to some of the cast. Ron later said in interviews that she wasn't very friendly to him as a child, and that she didn't seem to like him much. It's tough for any kid, let alone one working long days on a busy television set. He said that even though she played his aunt on the show, she didn't treat him like family in real life. Her attitude and behavior didn't make it easy for Ron to feel comfortable around her, and it caused quiet tension during the years they worked together. Ron wasn't the only one who had problems with Frances. Andy Griffith himself also struggled to get along with her. Their relationship, although very close on screen, was said to be strained when the cameras weren't rolling. Andy was lighthearted and friendly, often joking with the cast and crew. Frances, on the other hand, kept to herself, and people often said she took things too seriously. She was very professional, but she didn't enjoy small talk or being part of the group. This difference in personality caused distance between her and the rest of the team. Over the years, their lack of connection grew wider, and some said it even turned into a full feud that lasted long after the show ended. Frances reportedly called Andy years later to apologize, saying she had a hard time making friends on set. But by then, the damage had already been done. While she may have meant well, her behavior affected many people, especially young Ron Howard. Despite the problems he faced on the set, Ron Howard didn't let it stop him. In fact, he used those experiences to grow and become one of the most respected names in Hollywood. Born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, Ron was raised in a showbiz family. His father, Rance Howard, was an actor and writer, and his mother, Zhang, was also an actress. Ron was practically born into the entertainment world. He appeared in his first film at age 5 and had roles in several popular shows like The Twilight Zone and Dennis the Menace before landing the role of Opie. Even though he was just a child, he worked hard and learned a lot on set. But not all lessons came from scripts. He learned about people too, how some could be kind, like Don Knotts, and how others could be distant. Like Frances Bavier, Ron was a bright and curious child, and he always paid attention to how things worked behind the scenes. While many kids might have been scared off by bad experiences, Ron seemed to use them as motivation. After the Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, Ron continued acting. In 1974, he got another big break as Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. He played a kind, clean-cut teenager, a role that was very similar to his earlier character. But even while acting, Ron had his eyes set on something bigger: directing. He wanted to be the one calling the shots, shaping the story, and managing the mood on set. Maybe, after working in an environment with difficult people, he wanted to create something better, something more respectful, something kinder. His first chance came with a deal from producer Roger Corman. Ron agreed to star in a movie called Eat My Dust. He would be allowed to direct his own film, and that's exactly what he did. In 1977, Grand Theft Auto, a low-budget action comedy, became his directorial debut. It wasn't a huge blockbuster, but it showed that Ron had talent. Behind the camera, he followed it up with TV movies, and by 1982, he directed Night Shift, which starred Michael Keaton and Henry Winkler. That film caught people's attention. 2 years later, he directed Splash, a romantic comedy that turned Tom Hanks into a star and became a box office hit. More successful films followed, including Cocoon, Parenthood, Apollo 13, and A Beautiful Mind, which won him an Academy Award for Best Director. Ron's journey from child actor to top Hollywood director was nothing short of amazing. Through it all, Ron never became bitter. He rarely spoke badly about anyone, including Frances Bavier. He remained humble, focused, and hardworking. That's part of what makes his story so inspiring. He took the hard parts of his childhood, including being treated coldly by a castmate, and turned it into fuel for a better future. Instead of letting bad memories hold him back, he used them to push himself forward. He built a career where kindness, collaboration, and respect were part of the process. And while many actors fade after childhood fame, Ron only grew stronger. With time today, when people look back at the Andy Griffith Show, they remember the laughter, the life lessons, and the gentle spirit of Mayberry. They think of Sheriff Taylor teaching young Opie about honesty and love. They think of Aunt Bee's warm meals, Barney Fife's funny outbursts, and the calm, peaceful days of a town that never really existed. But for Ron Howard, those years were more complex. While he gained fame and valuable experience, he also saw how difficult people could be and how important it is to treat others with kindness, especially when they're young and still learning. Ron never publicly said he hated Frances Bavier, but his words and the stories shared by others make it clear that she made his early acting days harder than they needed to be, and he wasn't alone. Even Andy Griffith struggled with her, and their feud lasted well beyond the show's final season. But in the end, it's Ron's success that speaks loudest. He turned a painful experience into a powerful lesson. He learned how not to treat people, and used that lesson to build a long, successful, and meaningful career. That's the true story behind the boy from Mayberry who grew into one of Hollywood's most respected storytellers. The Andy Griffith Show was one of the most beloved American TV shows in history. Families would gather around their televisions to enjoy the peaceful, funny, and kind world of Mayberry. At the heart of the show was Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith. He was calm, friendly, and always knew how to solve any problem. Without yelling or fighting, his character was a widowed father, and he was always ready to help his son, Opie, and the townspeople with their troubles. Andy Taylor was the kind of man people respected and looked up to. The show made viewers feel like Mayberry was a real place, a perfect town where people cared for one another. But behind the scenes, it wasn't so perfect. Ron Howard, who played young Opie Taylor, was just a child during filming. Still, he noticed the tension around him. He has spoken warmly about Andy Griffith and how much he respected him. But he also witnessed one of the show's biggest secrets: the quiet but deep conflict between Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee. On screen, Aunt Bee was the sweet, wise, and loving woman who kept the Taylor home in order. Off-screen, however, Frances Bavier was very different from her character. She was private, serious, and did not like to mix work with personal life. While Andy Griffith enjoyed joking around with the cast and keeping things light, Frances preferred to be alone, focusing on her lines and her role. This created problems. Andy was warm and open. Frances was distant and strict. That difference caused many awkward and even cold moments between them. One actor, Howard Morris, who played Ernest T-Base, once said that working with Frances was like walking through a minefield. Something as small as asking her to move a few inches for a camera shot could lead to an argument. She was very particular about her space, her performance, and how she was treated. And if she felt anyone disrespected her, she didn't stay quiet. Ron Howard didn't fully understand everything as a kid, but he could feel the tension. He later spoke about how unusual it was to feel that kind of coldness on a set that was meant to be so warm. Things got so bad that years later, Andy Griffith tried to visit Frances at her home to make peace. He knocked on her door, uninvited, hoping for a friendly talk, but she was not happy. She felt her privacy was invaded and told him to leave. That attempt at reconciliation failed, and their relationship remained broken for many more years. As time went on, both Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier moved on with their lives. Frances left acting and settled in a small town in North Carolina, not far from the fictional Mayberry she once lived in on screen. She became known as a woman who kept to herself. She didn't attend Hollywood events, and she didn't give many interviews. Many neighbors didn't even realize she had once been a famous TV star. But as her health declined, she began to think about the past, especially about the people she had worked with and the walls she had built between them. Frances was battling cancer and other serious heart problems. She was often in and out of the hospital and knew her time was running out. One day, near the end of her life, Frances picked up the phone and called Andy Griffith. It was the call everyone had been waiting for, the one no one thought would ever happen. And in that moment, she finally apologized. Andy later said she told him, "I'm sorry we didn't get along better. It was my fault." She admitted that she had been difficult and cold. She told him that she appreciated everything he had done for the show and respected his leadership. For Andy, it was a powerful moment. He didn't hold a grudge. He forgave her immediately. That phone call gave them both a sense of peace before. Frances passed away in 1989 at the age of 86. Andy Griffith would also live to be 86. He passed away many years later, in 2012, in North Carolina. His family buried him in the place he loved most, Roanoke Island. Andy had lived a full life, full of work, success, and personal reflection. And for Ron Howard, these two people, Andy and Frances, were not just actors. They were teachers. From them, he learned about kindness, pride, stubbornness, forgiveness, and most of all, what it means to truly care for people, even if they aren't perfect. But Ron Howard had his own story too. While the set of the Andy Griffith Show was full of tension between two adults, Ron was slowly building something strong and rare in his own life, a love story that would outshine almost anything in Hollywood. He met Cheryl Alley when they were just 16 years old. He had red hair and freckles. She had a gentle spirit and a quiet confidence. Their first date was classic and simple. A drive in his mint green Volkswagen Beetle, a movie, and some pizza. Years later, Ron would say that the car still runs great, and so do they. They got married in 1975, but it wasn't easy. Cheryl didn't say yes the first time he proposed. It took 3 tries. She wanted to make sure she finished school, had her own goals, and felt ready. That patience and thoughtfulness would become the foundation of their relationship. Through good times and hard times, through raising for kids and building careers, they stood by each other. In 2025, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, a rare and beautiful milestone in any marriage, especially in Hollywood. What makes this whole story so powerful is how much Ron Howard witnessed and learned. He saw the way pride, privacy, and misunderstandings could break a friendship, like what happened between Andy Griffith and Frances Bavier. But he also saw that healing was possible, even after years of silence. Frances's final phone call wasn't just about her and Andy. It showed Ron and the world that people can grow, that even the strongest walls can fall when we find the courage to say, "I'm sorry." And in contrast, Ron's own life became proof that relationships built on love, respect, and patience can last a lifetime. Hollywood is full of loud romances and sudden breakups, but Ron and Cheryl Howard proved that the quiet kind of love, the one that shows up every day, listens, forgives, and grows, is the one that truly endures. From his childhood days in Mayberry to his 50th anniversary, on a sunset beach with his wife, Ron Howard's life tells a story that's much deeper than just acting. It's a story about choosing grace over bitterness, love over ego, and always paddling forward, no matter how rough the waters may get. Ron Howard is one of the rare people in Hollywood who started as a child star and grew into a respected, award-winning director. He became famous in the 1960s as a little boy named Opie on The Andy Griffith Show. Later, played Richie Cunningham in Happy Days. Audiences loved him. He was sweet, polite, and always had a friendly face. As a child, Ron was paying close attention to the people around him. He wasn't just acting, he was learning. He saw how sets worked, how directors gave instructions, and how actors behaved when the cameras weren't rolling. Even though he was young, he had a deep understanding of storytelling and filmmaking. By 1977, Ron decided to try something new. Directed his first film called Grand Theft Auto. It wasn't related to the video game. The movie was chaotic and simple, but full of passion. It showed that Ron had something special. In the 1980s, he directed more movies like Splash with Tom Hanks and Willow, a fantasy adventure. People enjoyed the films, but critics still didn't take him seriously, and he saw him as just Opie trying something new. But Ron didn't stop. He kept improving his skills and learning from every success and failure. Then came the early 2000s, and everything changed. In 2000, Ron directed How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which became a big hit. The following year, he made A Beautiful Mind. This film was based on the true story of John Nash, a brilliant man who struggled with mental illness. The movie touched people's hearts, starred famous actors like Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, Ed Harris, and Christopher Plummer. The acting was strong, the storytelling was powerful, and the direction was beautiful. It won many awards, including Best Director for Ron Howard and Best Picture at the Oscars. People finally saw him as a serious filmmaker, but not everyone was happy. Some critics were upset because the movie left out important parts of John Nash's life. For example, it didn't mention that he had a child outside of marriage or that he didn't support that child. It also didn't talk about rumors regarding Nash's sexuality. Critics felt that Ron had removed these parts to make the story easier to watch. Ron later explained that he wanted to focus on the emotional side of the story, not every detail of Nash's personal life. Even so, the backlash was tough. But what bothered Ron the most wasn't the criticism. It was how the controversy affected John Nash. People were saying hurtful things about a man who was still alive and had already suffered a lot. That was a line Ron didn't want crossed. Ron Howard has always been known as a calm, thoughtful man in Hollywood. He avoids drama. He doesn't argue online. He quietly does his work and lets it speak for itself. But even someone like Ron has limits, and in recent years, something happened that pushed him too far. It involved another man whose story Ron tried to share with J.D. Vance. Vance wrote a best-selling memoir called Hillbilly Elegy about growing up in a poor Appalachian family. Ron directed the film version for Netflix. At the time, Vance wasn't a politician. He was just someone with a powerful personal story. Ron saw value in that story, wanted to show the struggle, the grit, and the resilience. But years later, Vance entered politics and began saying things that shocked Ron. His speeches and beliefs were very different from the man Ron thought he knew. Ron didn't say anything loudly. He didn't tweet or hold a press conference, but people noticed the disappointment in his voice. For Ron, this wasn't just about politics. It felt personal, like he had tried to share someone's journey, only for that person to change into someone completely different. To understand why this bothered Ron so much, we have to go way back to his childhood on the Andy Griffith Show. On screen, the show looked warm and friendly. It was all about small-town life, simple lessons, and family values. But behind the scenes, not everything was perfect. Most people assumed the cast got along well. After all, the show felt like one big happy family. But there was one person Ron had trouble with, Frances Bavier, the actress who played Aunt Bee. To the audience, she was a sweet, caring woman. But to young Ron, she felt cold and distant. She didn't treat him badly, but she never treated him warmly either. Ron felt like she didn't like him. She didn't talk to him much, and when she did, it wasn't with kindness. Imagine being a child, working long hours, and having to act like you love someone on camera when that person hardly speaks to you off camera. It was confusing and a little painful. One episode in particular, the famous pickle story, was especially hard. In it, Opie has to eat jars of Aunt Bee's terrible homemade pickles. In real life, Ron hated pickles, but he had to eat them. Again and again for multiple takes. It was pure misery. And doing it across from Bavier, who made him feel small, only made it worse. That experience stayed with him for years. He didn't talk about it much, but when asked, He never pretended that working with Aunt B was a happy memory. The truth is, that kind of silent tension teaches you something, especially when you're young. Ron learned early what it felt like to be treated as if you didn't matter. He understood how painful it was to be made to feel small by someone who was supposed to care. So years later, when J.D. Vance started talking in ways that felt mean, judgmental, or unkind, it hit Ron in a familiar place. He had opened a door for someone who now seemed like a stranger. It wasn't just political. It was about values, about honesty, about empathy. Ron doesn't like feeling fooled. And he doesn't like when people use their stories to gain trust and then betray that trust. That's what made the disappointment with Vance so deep. It reminded Ron of the past. Of pickles, cold stares, and fake smiles. Even in his movies. Ron tends to tell stories about hope, redemption, and overcoming struggles. He likes stories that show the best in people. It's probably why he struggled when those same people later showed a darker side. It's one thing to tell a hard story. It's another to realize that the person at the center of it has changed into someone you no longer recognize. It's not just frustrating, it's heartbreaking. That's what Ron felt. And instead of shouting about it, he spoke in a softer way, thoughtful way. But his silence between the lines said more than any angry speech could. He wanted people to pay attention, to see how quickly someone can go from being a symbol of strength to someone who causes division. And he knew that if it could happen, to him, someone so careful and kind, it could happen to anyone. Ron Howard has never been the kind of person who makes drama. He doesn't attack others or seek revenge. He just keeps working, telling good stories and doing his best to make people feel something. But even someone as calm as Ron reaches a point where they have to speak up. Watching J.D. Vance's political rise didn't just upset him, it reminded him of the risks that come with storytelling. When you choose to tell someone else's life, story especially someone complex, you carry a heavy responsibility. If you soften the truth, people might say you lied. If you include too much, people might say you were cruel. Either way, you can't win. But Ron didn't speak up because he wanted to be right. He spoke up because he felt hurt. He had believed in Vance's story, believed in his strength and humility. Now, it all felt fake. Oh, and that hurt. But instead of shouting, Ron gave us a message. He reminded us that not everything you see is real. Smiles can be fake. Stories can be shaped. People can wear masks on TV, in books, and even in politics. That's why he told people, watch closely, think critically. Don't believe everything at face value. And most importantly, vote. Because the choices we make today decide what kind of world we'll live in tomorrow. For someone like Ron Howard, who's been in Hollywood for over 60 years, that advice carries weight. He's seen actors fake emotions, writers twist stories, and directors change endings to please audiences. But he's also seen truth shine through. He's seen honesty move people to tears, and he knows that story's real. Honest stories can change the world. So when you see a headline, or hear a powerful speech, or read a best-selling book, ask yourself, is this real? Is this person showing their true self, or just the version they want you to see? Ron Howard learned that lesson the hard way from Aunt B to J.D. Vance, and now he's passing it on to us. He's not bitter, he's just wiser. And through it all, he still believes in the power of storytelling. Because even when stories let us down, they can also lift us up. They can teach us. They can open our eyes. And if we listen carefully enough, they can help us tell better stories of our own. Ron Howard's story is not just about fame, success, or awards. It's about the quiet strength of a man who has spent his whole life observing, learning, and growing in a world full of bright lights and loud voices. From the moment he stepped onto the set of the Andy Griffith Show as a small boy, Ron was surrounded by people who shaped him for better or worse. His time with Frances Bavier, who played Aunt B, taught him early that the person you see on screen is not always the same person behind the scenes. That experience may have been painful, but it became one of his earliest lessons in understanding people beyond their roles. As Ron grew older, he didn't hold on to anger. Instead, he turned his experiences into empathy, becoming a director who told stories with heart and purpose. His movies, like A Beautiful Mind and Apollo 13, weren't just box office hits, they were deeply human. They showed the struggles behind genius, the pain behind courage, and the quiet battles people fight every day. Ron used his camera not to judge, but to reveal. He respected the people at the center of his films, even when their stories were complicated. That's why the disappointment with J.D. Vance hit him so hard. Ron believed in Vance's memoir. He believed in the message of resilience, survival, and transformation. But years later, watching Vance speak and act in ways that felt cold and divisive, Ron felt something shift. The story he thought he helped share turned into something unrecognizable. For a man who values honesty and compassion, it felt like betrayal. And it reminded him, just like Aunt Bee once did that sometimes. People are not who they first appear to be. Yet through it all, Ron hasn't become bitter. He hasn't lashed out or sought revenge. He's remained true to who he is. Calm, careful, and thoughtful. But this time, he did speak. Not with anger, but with a message. He reminded all of us that storytelling is powerful, but it's also dangerous when used the wrong way. He urged us to look closer, ask questions, and think for ourselves. He reminded us that trust is earned, and that even the most charming stories can hide uncomfortable truths. Ron, Howard's journey is proof that strength doesn't always need a spotlight. It lives in patience, in reflection, in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. And when he does speak, it's worth listening. Because Ron has seen the truth behind the scenes, and he wants to help us see it too.